I was at a fancy restaurant, dressed up and excited, when I reached for my wallet, and it wasn't in my bag. Panic washed over me, and then a deep voice whispered in my ear, "Tonight, I've got you." I froze because it was the billionaire sitting across the table. Before I tell you what happened that night, hit that like button and subscribe, because you won't believe how one forgotten wallet led to the most unforgettable night of my life. I could feel my heart racing the moment I stepped out of the car. The city lights reflected off the sleek glass walls of the restaurant, casting a golden glow that made everything feel surreal, almost like I had stepped into another world. My hands were slightly shaky, but I tried to calm myself with a deep breath. Tonight wasn't just any dinner. It was a night I'd been anticipating for days, ever since the invitation landed in my inbox. There was something thrilling about being chosen, about the idea that someone I barely knew yet clearly admired had picked me to join him in such a luxurious setting. I had spent what felt like hours deciding what to wear, wanting to strike the perfect balance between elegance and effortless charm. In the end, I settled on a sleek black dress that hugged my curves in all the right places, paired with a delicate gold necklace that caught the light every time I moved. My heels clicked against the marble floor as I walked in, each step making my anticipation build, my nerves mixing with a strange excitement. I felt a flutter in my stomach, that familiar tension that comes with stepping into the unknown, especially when it's wrapped in glamour and allure. And then, there he was. Even from across the room, I noticed him first. Not the suit, not the watch, not even the rare car parked outside, but the aura he carried. There was a calm confidence in the way he stood, a quiet magnetism that seemed to pull the entire room toward him without him trying. His eyes met mine, and for a moment the world around us blurred. It was just him and me, and the unspoken energy that sparked between us. He smiled, just a subtle tilt of the lips, but it was enough to make my chest tighten in a way I hadn't expected. When he approached, I tried to steady my voice, to sound casual, but I could feel the faint tremor of excitement in every word. He extended his hand politely, but it wasn't the gesture that left an impression. It was the warmth behind it, the genuine curiosity in his gaze. Our conversation started lightly, almost playfully, with small talk about the city, the ambiance, even the menu. There was a natural rhythm to it, the kind that only happens when two people feel an instant, unexplainable connection. As we sat down, appetizers arriving with a flourish, I realized how easy it was to forget myself in his presence. Each bite of food, each shared laugh, each slight glance exchanged carried more weight than I could have imagined. I found myself leaning in a little, listening more closely to every word he said, noticing the subtle inflections in his tone, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. I was entirely captivated, not just by the luxury surrounding us, but by the way he made me feel, seen, appreciated, like I belonged in this moment as much as he did. Everything was going perfectly, or so I thought, until I reached for my wallet. My heart sank immediately. I patted down the small clutch I had tucked on my lap, then frantically checked the inside pockets of my dress. Nothing. My stomach twisted into knots, and I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. How could I have forgotten my wallet? I replayed the day in my mind, trying to remember if I had left it in my car, on the counter at home, or if I had even brought it at all. The more I thought, the worse the panic became. I tried to steady my breathing, to act casual, but I could feel my hands trembling ever so slightly. The waiter appeared with our next course, perfectly timed as if to remind me of my incompetence. I managed a weak smile, trying to push down the embarrassment that threatened to spill over. I kept telling myself, just breathe. Nobody has to know. Yet. But I couldn't shake the prickle of anxiety crawling up my spine. What if the bill came and I had no way to pay? The thought of making a scene, of fumbling in front of him, was unbearable. I tried to focus on our conversation, to laugh lightly at something he had said, but my mind was screaming at me. Each laugh felt forced, each word slightly delayed. I caught him looking at me for a split second, and I thought I saw a flicker of amusement, or was it curiosity, in his eyes. My pulse quickened. I wanted to explain, to apologize preemptively, but the words wouldn't come. I felt completely exposed, every ounce of poise I had carefully cultivated threatening to crumble. The table felt smaller suddenly, the room brighter, the murmurs around us louder. I tried to subtly shift my clutch, hoping no one noticed my panic, wishing I could disappear into my chair. My inner monologue was a whirlwind. How could I be so careless? Why tonight? Of all nights, the irony wasn't lost on me. I had imagined this dinner as flawless, elegant, and maybe even magical. And now, a simple oversight threatened to ruin it. And then it happened. A calm, deep voice, almost a whisper, cut through the chaos in my mind. Tonight, I've got you. I froze, unsure if I had imagined it. The warmth behind those words wrapped around me instantly, easing the tension just enough to make me look up. His eyes were steady, confident, unwavering. No judgment, no irritation, just a quiet assurance that everything would be fine. I felt my panic soften, replaced by a strange mixture of relief and curiosity. How did he know exactly what to say to make the fear fade, while also making my heart race? In that moment, I realized something. This dinner wasn't just about food or luxury. It was about the connection we had built in the last hour, the trust forming between us in the most unexpected way. Even as my wallet remained forgotten, I felt completely, inexplicably seen, and that thought, more than anything, made the night feel like it was only just beginning. The moment his words reached me, "Tonight, I've got you," something shifted. The tension that had been clawing at my chest loosened, just a little, and I felt a strange warmth spreading from my shoulders down to my fingertips. I kept my eyes on him, trying to read his expression, but there was nothing hurried or anxious in his demeanor. Instead, there was a calm confidence, a quiet certainty that he had everything under control. And somehow, that assurance wrapped around me like a soft, protective blanket. I couldn't stop the small shiver that ran through me, partly from relief, partly from the unexpected intimacy of his words. A whisper meant for only me, a private thread woven into the hum of the restaurant, made my pulse spike. I realized then that this wasn't just a gesture of courtesy or a casual comment. It was deliberate, meant to make me feel safe, valued, and entirely in his presence. And yet, it carried a hint of mischief, a playfulness that made my imagination run wild. I tried to respond with a light laugh, the kind that would make me seem casual, but my voice felt tight, trapped somewhere between embarrassment and exhilaration. My hands rested on the table, fingers tapping lightly against the polished wood, as if trying to keep themselves from revealing too much of my inner chaos. He noticed the flutter, of course. His eyes softened, almost imperceptibly, and that small shift sent another thrill through me. I felt like he could see every fleeting thought, every little panic, and yet he didn't judge me for it. Instead, he made me feel like it was perfectly okay to be exactly who I was. We returned to our conversation, and I found myself listening more closely than before. Every word he said seemed to carry weight, but not the heavy kind, more like a pull, subtle and irresistible. He asked questions about me, not just the surface level ones, but the ones that made me pause and think, that made me realize he genuinely wanted to understand who I was. The way he leaned slightly forward, attentive but not intrusive, made me feel seen in a way I rarely experienced. It was intoxicating and yet comforting. I caught myself smiling, and it wasn't forced. It was effortless, spontaneous. I noticed the tiny gestures he made, a nod here, a soft chuckle there, the way he held eye contact just long enough to let me know he was present, fully. The air between us felt electric yet grounded, like lightning contained within a quiet storm. My earlier panic about the wallet seemed almost trivial now, insignificant compared to the way he had managed to turn what should have been an embarrassing moment into something unexpectedly intimate, something memorable. By the time the next course arrived, I realized my heart wasn't racing from fear anymore. It was racing from anticipation. Anticipation for his words, his gestures, the unspoken promises in his gaze. For the first time that night, I let myself fully relax, letting the warmth of his presence wash over me. I had no idea what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. He had me completely captivated, and there was no turning back. I was still caught up in the flutter of emotions from his whispered words when I noticed the waiter approaching to present the check. My heart sank again, the memory of my missing wallet creeping back into my mind. I tried to act calm, giving him a polite, reassuring smile, but the knot in my stomach refused to loosen. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, the flush of embarrassment threatening to show itself. I braced for the moment when I would have to admit my mistake, for the awkwardness of explaining that I had forgotten something as simple as a wallet. Then, almost effortlessly, he took the check from the waiter's hand. There was a quiet grace to his movement, a subtle, unhurried confidence that somehow put me at ease. He didn't make a show of it, didn't draw attention, but the gesture spoke volumes. The tension that had been building inside me began to melt away, replaced by a warmth I hadn't expected. I felt a quiet surge of gratitude, though I tried to hide it behind a casual smile. There was no arrogance in his actions, no sense of superiority, just an understated kindness, the kind that makes a person feel truly seen and cared for. As he returned to his seat, I couldn't help but notice the little things. The way he adjusted his cuff, the soft smile lingering on his lips, the way his eyes met mine with a subtle twinkle that made my pulse race. It was in these quiet gestures, the ones that didn't demand attention, that I felt the depth of his thoughtfulness. He was aware of my panic, aware of how self-conscious I felt, and yet he handled it with a sophistication that was almost effortless. I felt both embarrassed and strangely exhilarated, caught between awe and attraction in a way that made it hard to focus on anything else. We continued our conversation, and I found myself leaning in a little, drawn to the rhythm of our connection. The appetizers had already left an impression, but now there was something deeper, a sense of intimacy that transcended the luxury of the restaurant or the elegance of the surroundings. Every laugh, every shared glance felt charged with meaning. I realized that this wasn't just a dinner. It was a carefully crafted dance of attention and subtlety, and I was wholly captivated. In that moment, I understood that the wallet incident had done more than create a minor panic. It had opened a door. It had revealed a side of him that was attentive, protective, and deeply considerate, all without a word being spoken directly to me about it. I felt special, not because he had wealth or status, but because he had chosen to make me feel safe, important, and valued. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had made me feel this way, and it left me both breathless and curious. By the time the main course arrived, I was no longer thinking about my forgotten wallet at all. The embarrassment had faded, replaced by anticipation and wonder. Every glance he gave, every subtle smile, seemed designed to pull me further into the night, and I realized, with a thrill I could hardly contain, that this evening was far from over. As we stepped outside, the crisp evening air wrapped around me, a refreshing contrast to the warmth inside the restaurant. The city lights flickered across the pavement, casting long shadows that danced like silent witnesses to the night. I felt a shiver, not from the cold, but from the lingering electricity of the evening. My heels clicked softly against the ground as we walked side by side, and for a moment I noticed how natural it felt to be near him, to match his pace without effort. He glanced at me, that quiet, confident smile playing at the corners of his lips. "You're enjoying tonight," he said casually, but there was a subtle warmth behind the words that made my chest tighten. I nodded, almost breathless, trying to sound composed while my thoughts raced a mile a minute. I caught myself studying the way he carried himself, his ease, the subtle strength in his posture, the calm certainty in his movements. Every detail seemed designed to captivate, yet he didn't appear conscious of it, which only made it more magnetic. We talked lightly as we strolled, about nothing and everything all at once. His laughter was easy, unforced, and I found myself leaning in slightly, drawn to the sound, to the energy he exuded. The conversation flowed naturally, yet beneath it was a current of tension I couldn't ignore, the kind that makes your heart skip and your senses sharpen, even in the simplest exchanges. Every glance, every subtle brush of his hand near mine felt deliberate, teasing, inviting, and I could feel the thrill building quietly between us. I realized how rare it was to feel this level of comfort and excitement with someone I had just met. Normally, I guarded my emotions, measured my reactions, and kept a careful distance. But with him, it felt different, safe, yet exhilarating. He had a way of making me feel noticed without overwhelming me, and I couldn't help but wonder if he even realized the effect he had. As we paused for a moment to look at the city skyline, our shoulders almost brushing, I felt a soft, unexpected connection, a shared presence that was deeper than the words we exchanged. The night felt suspended in that delicate balance between anticipation and intimacy, and I knew, instinctively, that what had started as a simple dinner was transforming into something far more meaningful, far more unforgettable than I could have imagined. After walking for a while, we found a quiet spot where the city's hum softened, leaving us in a kind of private bubble. It was the kind of moment that felt suspended in time, where nothing else existed except the two of us. I remember leaning slightly against the railing, feeling the cool metal under my fingers, and noticing how calm he seemed, as if he carried the weight of the world effortlessly. I realized I wanted to know more, not just who he was publicly, but the person behind the polished exterior, the one who had been so attentive and considerate all evening. Our conversation took a different turn here, softer, more honest. He shared stories that were not just anecdotes, but little windows into his life, moments that revealed vulnerability beneath the confidence. I listened intently, fascinated by the depth behind his charm. Each revelation made him feel more real, more tangible, more someone I could genuinely connect with. In response, I opened up, sharing details about my life that I usually kept guarded. My voice was quieter, more thoughtful, but there was a sense of freedom in it, as if this private space allowed me to lower the walls I usually carried everywhere. We laughed over small confessions, but there were pauses too, comfortable silences filled with unspoken understanding. I noticed the way he watched me, not just seeing, but observing, absorbing, reacting in subtle ways that made me feel truly acknowledged. I felt a warmth spread through me, the kind that comes from realizing someone is genuinely interested in who you are, not just the image you project. I remember thinking about how rare this felt. So often, encounters like this are shallow, fleeting, marked by politeness or superficial charm. But this was layered, sincere, and magnetic. The evening had shifted from excitement to a meaningful connection, and I was acutely aware of every detail: the soft tone of his voice, the way his eyes seemed to hold questions and understanding all at once, the gentle cadence of our dialogue that pulled me in deeper with every word. As I glanced at him, I realized that this night had already etched itself into my memory. The laughter, the confessions, the unspoken connection. It all felt like the start of something rare and intoxicating. And in that quiet moment, I couldn't help but feel a rush of anticipation for what the rest of the night might bring, knowing that somehow we had both stumbled into a space where we could be entirely ourselves. We lingered in that quiet space, and the night seemed to stretch around us, slowing time in a way that made every second feel heavier, more significant. The air between us carried a charged energy, subtle but impossible to ignore. I felt it in the gentle brush of his hand as it passed near mine, in the way his gaze held mine just a fraction longer than necessary, and in the quiet confidence that seemed to emanate from him effortlessly. My heart was racing in a way that I hadn't anticipated, a thrilling combination of excitement and curiosity. Then, almost impossibly, he leaned in closer. His voice dropped to a whisper, intimate and deliberate, carrying just enough warmth to make my skin tingle. "Tonight is yours," he murmured, and I felt my entire body respond to the words. It wasn't just a casual comment, it was a promise, a subtle declaration that set my mind alight with possibilities. I could feel my pulse quicken, my breath catching as I processed the weight of what he had said. There was no pressure in his tone, only a quiet assurance that tonight was meant to be shared, in whatever way it unfolded naturally. I found myself instinctively leaning in, drawn to the intimacy of the moment. My thoughts raced, a mix of exhilaration and disbelief. How could someone I had met just hours ago evoke such a profound reaction in me? There was something magnetic about him, something that went beyond charm or wealth, that made it impossible to look away. My hands, which had been resting lightly at my sides, now twitched with anticipation, as though they too could sense the tension building between us. We didn't speak for a while after that. Silence fell over us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was thick with anticipation, heavy with the unspoken. Every subtle movement, every shift in posture, every glance carried meaning. I felt a connection that was almost tangible, as if the space between us had transformed into a shared pulse of electricity. I noticed the small details, the way his eyes flickered toward mine, the way his lips curved just slightly, the quiet power in his presence that made the world outside our bubble feel distant and insignificant. My mind swirled with a mix of excitement and curiosity. I was both cautious and exhilarated, aware of the boundaries yet eager to see where the night might lead. Every instinct screamed that this was rare, a moment I might never experience again, and I felt a surge of gratitude for it, even amidst the fluttering nerves. The whispered promise had done more than set my heart racing. It had unlocked a depth of anticipation I hadn't realized I was capable of feeling, making me acutely aware that the night was far from over, and that the best, most intoxicating moments were still to come. By the time we returned to a quieter, more private space, the night had settled into something that felt both electric and intimate. The city lights outside cast a soft glow, but it was the energy between us that illuminated everything. I could feel his presence fully now, every subtle movement, every shift in tone, pulling me closer into the orbit of his attention. My heart raced with a mixture of anticipation and awe, the kind that makes it hard to focus on anything but the person in front of you. We spoke less and listened more, the conversation soft and deliberate. Each laugh, each glance, each fleeting touch felt magnified, heightened by the intimacy of the moment. I found myself leaning in, drawn toward him without thinking, and when our fingers brushed, the shiver that ran through me was undeniable. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, a connection that felt rare, almost like we had stepped out of time and into a space where only we existed. There were moments when words weren't needed at all. I noticed the small things, how his eyes softened when he looked at me, the subtle way he mirrored my movements, the quiet attention that made me feel wholly seen. Every gesture carried intention, yet it never felt forced. It was as if the entire night had been leading up to this moment, a slow build of anticipation that now crescendoed in something profoundly stirring. My thoughts swirled with disbelief and excitement. How could someone I had met just hours ago make me feel so understood, so valued, and so alive? There was laughter, yes, but there were also pauses, quiet spaces filled with unspoken understanding. And in those pauses, I realized that connection wasn't about words or grand gestures. It was about presence, about the way someone could make you feel safe, seen, and entirely caught up in the magic of the moment. By the time we finally leaned back, a comfortable silence settling around us, I felt a deep, satisfying warmth in my chest. The night had transformed from a simple dinner into something unforgettable, a shared experience that left my heart full, my mind buzzing, and my spirit exhilarated, and as I sat there, catching my breath, I knew with certainty that this was more than just an ordinary night. This was a night I would remember forever, a night when anticipation, charm, and connection intertwined to create something extraordinary. The next morning, sunlight streamed softly through my curtains, painting the room in gentle golds and warm shadows. I lay there for a moment, still wrapped in the lingering warmth of the night before, replaying it in my mind like a delicate film. Every laugh, every whispered word, every subtle glance returned vividly, as if the night had left invisible traces on my skin and in my chest. I couldn't help but smile, even though the world outside my room carried on in its usual rhythm, unaware of the magic I had just experienced. I thought about him, about how effortless he had been, how he had taken a potentially embarrassing moment, my forgotten wallet, and transformed it into something intimate, something unforgettable. The memory of his whisper, the quiet promise that tonight was mine, echoed in my mind, and I felt that same flutter in my stomach. It wasn't just about charm or luxury. It was the way he made me feel seen, valued, and safe, all while igniting a thrilling excitement that lingered long after he had left. As I sat up, I realized how rare it was to encounter someone who could create such a balance of emotions. The night had been a perfect blend of anticipation, tension, intimacy, and joy, leaving me with a sense of wonder I hadn't felt in a long time. I reflected on my own reactions, the little moments when I had let myself relax completely, allowing the magic of the night to take hold. It was as if I had been given a glimpse into a different world, a world where connection and attention could feel effortless, powerful, and deeply meaningful all at once. Even now, hours later, I could still feel the pull of that connection, the subtle thrill that had kept my heart racing throughout the evening. It left me questioning, imagining, hoping for what might come next, while also feeling an unspoken gratitude for the unexpected joy of the night itself. I realized that this experience wasn't just a fleeting encounter. It was a reminder that life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it, that magic can appear in the most ordinary moments, and that sometimes all it takes is one person to make you feel completely, unapologetically alive. Sitting there in the morning light, I smiled to myself and whispered softly, almost to no one at all, "Tonight was mine, and I'll never forget it." If you've ever had a moment where life surprised you completely, you know this feeling. Comment below your unforgettable moments, hit like, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine. Who knows? Tonight, maybe life's got you too.